Welcome back to your music and news information channel, George Music for All Four Seasons. Today I'd like to take a few minutes out and recognize the great talent of someone who would have turned 94 years old today, Mr. Bob Crewe. Mr. Bob Crewe, I would say not a household name as in a Phil Spector, Barry Gordy, Brian Wilson, but a huge music producer, songwriter, and discovered quite a few very talented bands and singers. But anyway, we're going to just take a few minutes to talk about Bob Crewe, and I'd like to share a few things from my collection also on Crewe. Bob Crewe started out in the, I believe from what I've read, in the early 1950s, working with, met Frank Slay. They both wrote the huge hit for the Rays titled Silhouettes. Right there, and this was a huge song. Also wrote several songs for Freddie Cannon. I believe Bob Crewe discovered Freddie Cannon, actually Freddie Boom Boom Cannon, who sang Palisades Park, and just he had quite a few huge songs in the late 50s and early 60s. Some really good rock and roll music. Here is a photo of Crewe. He stopped by a radio station. I believe this goes back to 1955 or 6. I'd have to check. At the time, he was a Jubilee recording artist. And he met the lady that worked at the station by the name of Ann. And I have a story on Ann that eventually I'd like to share because there's several other pictures that were signed to her at this very popular radio station. Here it reads, to Ann, sincerely, Bob Crewe. And this hung on the wall, the radio station copy, from what I understand from the lady that handled her estate for several years until Ann left the radio station. Here is a picture sleeve from a single that was released by Bob Crewe, To Every Girl, To Every Boy. And Bob Crewe did release a few albums in the late 50s. I believe it late 50s or maybe very early 60s, 60, 61. And we'll take a look at one of those right now. Let me see, where is that at? Yeah, it's right here. And the album is Crazy in the Heart. Now, Crewe did not make it as big as he would have liked to in singing, but he is a very, very good singer. These albums maybe have a sound somewhat in the big band era, but just a really, really good album. And this one is Love, Sincerely, Bob. So that's one of his albums there. Now, he was also a teen idol back in the late 50s, I believe, through 60, 61. Here on the January 1960 edition of 16 magazine, Bob Crewe came out right there on the front cover as a teen idol. Now, in the magazine, they list Bob Crewe as 22-year-old Bob Crewe, but if he was born in 31, Bob Crewe was pretty close to 30, more like 29 years old. But anyway, nice little write-up in this magazine here. Also in the 50s, here is a little promotional card on Bob Crewe. Excuse that little drip there. This also came from the estate of Ann, who worked at the radio station. And reads back here, Bob Crewe National Fan Club. For anybody that wanted to join that fan club. And anyway, so something nice there, because I didn't know Bob Crewe had his own national fan club. But anyway, again, Bob Crewe was a male model, songwriter, again with the Rays, Billy and Lily, Freddie Cannon, Danny and the Juniors, several other artists he went to work with, and then really, I don't want to say exploded, because he had success before working with Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Bob Crewe throughout the 60s was also discovering other talent while working with the Four Seasons. Discovered Diane Renee, who had a huge hit in 1964 with Navy Blue. Very, very good singer, Diane Renee. I'm not sure how many albums she put out at the time. Also, Bob Crewe on his very own record label that he owned, Dynavoice, were the Toys. And this is a good album, written by Sandy Linzer and Denny Randall, who also wrote with Bob Gaudio the huge Four Seasons song, Don't Go Away. But a very, very good album here. And again, on a record company owned by Bob Crewe. Again, very successful individual in the music business. Also, we have, while working with the Four Seasons, also had his own orchestra, the Bob Crewe Orchestra, and put out the Bob Crewe Orchestra plays the song hits of the Four Seasons. Good album, good album. Also, we discovered Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wills. And great dance music, very, very good music here. And Bob Crewe was responsible working with Mitch Ryder and a few albums that they had put out together, but a very, very fine artist here. Also, in the late 60s, Bob Crewe went on to form his very own another record label, Crewe Records. And on that label, the Four Seasons also released a song on that label, and That Reminds Me, I believe reached the top, somewhere 43, 44, but then didn't do much after that, but it is a good song. Signed an artist by the name of Oliver, and this has Good Morning Starshine. A lot of you may be familiar with that song. This also signed by Mr. Crewe here. Good album. And the next, I believe Good Morning Starshine, and then Oliver also had a song out, Gene, which was another huge hit, and which leads me to this item I want to show you. 2, Rod McEwen. There's much more gold in Mount McEwen. There's a bit of it. There's a bit of it. Personal thanks from Bob Crewe for composing the song that made our first million seller possible, and that was for Crewe Records. Certified RIAA 1069, October of 1969. And this is a gold record that Bob Crewe presented to Mr. Rod McEwen for the song Gene. And again, it's a ballad, but just a great, great song. Now, in the 70s, Bob Crewe still continued to record as a solo artist. Put out this album, Motivation. Some really, really good music. And some that I feel should have charted, but didn't. There's a good song on here, A Marriage Made in Heaven. Oh, such a great melody. Just some really, really good stuff. Take a look at the inside. There's a nice little photo I like with Crewe in the studio there, working with all the musicians. So talented, Bob Crewe. He also put out the Bob Crewe Generation, Street Talk. This came out in 1976. Very heavy dance music with a nice disco dance flavor. Just some really, really good stuff. And also signed in the back, but really, really good record. Now, in 1974, Frankie Valli had out My Eyes Adored You, which reached the #1 chart position, I believe, for a week. Once that song fell from the #1 chart position, the next song reaching #1 was Lady Marmalade by LaBelle, which was also written by Bob Crewe and Kenny Nolan. I mean, to start out in the early 50s, to go on through the 70s and have back-to-back #1 hit records, I mean, that's talent. That is talent. But he's also responsible for Discotheques and the Sexolettes with Get Dancin' and I Want to Dance With You, which is on this album. Also very, very huge in the 70s. Now, Bob Crewe went on to continue to work with Frankie Valli with Swearing to God and the Close-Up album. I believe half of that was produced by Bob Crewe, the other half Bob Gaudio. Bob Crewe went on to write several songs with Bob Gaudio, Walk Like a Man, Big Girls Don't Cry, Ragdoll, just some great, great music. But again, as active as Bob Crewe was in the industry from the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and so far to this day not be considered to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's just hard for me to believe. I mean, I'm a fan of Phil Spector, Brian Wilson, Barry Gordy, all great musical heroes of mine. But again, Bob Crewe, who just was all over the place, various genres of music, I certainly believe he should have been inducted by now into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Here is the Bob Crewe Generation, Music to Watch Girls By. Now, this song here reached number 14 on the Billboard chart, and was taken from a Diet Pepsi commercial. The Pepsi generation, well, now we have the Bob Crewe generation. This album also signed by Bob Crewe there, along with the sheet music. But I believe this was Bob Crewe's highest charting single out of what he did as a solo artist. But anyway, as I started out saying, just taking a few minutes to recognize an individual who I feel should have been by now inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons are my favorite band. You know, their producer, songwriter, but his music ability goes beyond that and before the Four Seasons. You know, Danny and the Juniors, the Rays, Billy and Lily, Freddie Cannon, just a slew of artists. And then his work going on in the 60s and 70s, Oliver, Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wills, Leslie Gore, California Nights. Just a true musical hero of mine, Mr. Bob Crewe, who passed away in September of 2014. May he rest in peace, and wishing Bob Crewe a happy heavenly birthday. Take care, and I appreciate you watching. Be well. Bye now.